Okay, so Mavis Staples, before she starts singing Eyes on the Prize in her live album Hope at the Hideout, says, "We've come here tonight to bring you some joy, happiness, inspiration, and some positive vibrations. And we want to leave you enough to last you for the next 6 months." And seeing your play was like that for me.
Oh, bless you.
It really was. It's like I've been hyped for like 4 months straight.
You just won my heart just by quoting Mavis Staples. My goodness, how great.
I was listening to the album recently and I was like, that is what Hamilton is like for me. Like, it just gave me, I don't know, just like energy and hope and nourishment for just ever since I saw it. So it completely blew me away, and that's what great art, I believe, should do. So it's been like this phenomenon in my life. Anyway, I'm going to stop fangirling on you, but
please don't.
No. Okay, I'll sustain it a little bit. But
so
we were doing this thing with the Public Theatre, and we were in New York for
the Great Oscar Eustace.
Yes, and for International Women's Day, and so it just seemed perfect to talk to you about the play. So thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So for those of us that aren't lucky enough to be in New York here to see the play, and it's almost impossible to get a ticket at the moment, could you give us like a 30 seconds, like highlight reel synopsis?
Yeah, sure. Hamilton is the story of our nation's first Treasury Secretary, and it's as sexy as it sounds.
I'm past patiently waiting, I'm passionately smashing every expectation, every action's an act of creation. I'm laughing in the face of casualties of sorrow. For the first time I'm thinking past tomorrow.
It's about Alexander Hamilton. He's the dude on the $10 bill who had an amazing, tumultuous, unlikely American life. And I knew nothing about him until I picked up Ron Chernow's biography of him one day on vacation, and just felt like it was the proto-American immigrant story. Before there was an America, this guy sort of came here for a better life and managed to make one. It's also, in a weird way, a love letter to writers. This is a guy who wrote his way out of his circumstances, wrote his way into power, and also wrote his way to ruin, blew up his own spot, and caught beef with all the other founding fathers. And the music I use is all the music I can get my hands on. Yeah. So it's hip-hop music, and it's R&B music, and it's Beatlesque music for King George. Yeah. But it's our goal is to eliminate any distance between a contemporary audience and this story that happened over 200 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why people are so psyched about Hamilton, is that you just kind of blast through every expectation and tradition. You know, you use music that would be seemingly incongruous with the time, but that is so perfect as a way to express these ideas. And
structurally, I steal a little bit from Harry Potter, I have to tell you.
What?
Because the opening scene, Hamilton meets Aaron Burr, and he says, Aaron Burr, like, help me, like, I want to be in this world. And Burr gives him the opposite advice of who he is. And then he meets his real friends, Mulligan, Lafayette, and Laurens, and it's exactly Harry Potter meeting Malfoy first, and then seeing his real friends on the train, being I like these guys better.
I completely forgot that, because in the first book, Draco tries to be like, you know, I can help you.
I can help you.
Like,
just
tries to befriend
consort with
him,
the right people.
And Harry has this instinctual, like, this guy is clearly an asshole, and I have to.
Yeah, everything I learned from those books.
Yes, this is great. Harry Potter's everywhere. It's the ultimate universal story. Okay, good. So you wrote this play, which is set how many years ago now?
He was born in 1755. We go all the way through his life till his death in 1804.
Told with contemporary music, with all different kinds of music. But it's also been there's been this amazing response to it, because you cast a multiracial cast in the roles of, you know, who would traditionally have been white men. So I'm really interested. You kind of really have broken the mold. Did this just kind of like flow naturally from you as a person and an artist, or was this
it happened very organically. You know, I got to this end of the second chapter in this book. I get to the part where he literally writes an essay and gets himself out of the Caribbean. And I said, this is a hip-hop story. So even in my first read-through of the biography, I was casting hip-hop and R&B artists in my head. I was never picturing the literal founding fathers. We know what they look like. It takes exactly no research to find out what the founding fathers actually look like. You just open your wallet.
Right.
So the fun for me was in, all right, well, which R&B artist, hip-hop artist, music artist has the feel of the temperament. So, with George Washington, I was thinking about Common, and I was thinking about John Legend, and that's actually a pretty good description of Chris Jackson, who plays him. When I read the name Hercules Mulligan, I thought that's the most Busta Rhymesian sounding rapper name. It is such a great name.
So good.
So I wrote it as if Busta Rhymes was in my head. And so Tommy Kail just sort of took that and extended it and really said, this conceit just allows us to eliminate the distance even more. Because if it doesn't look like a John Trumbull painting from the 1700s, then we can identify, we can find our way into it in a way that makes it much more accessible than if it was just sort of a period piece.
Totally. Well, again, that was what was so cool is that, set hundreds and hundreds of years ago, but I kept seeing our time's topical issues that I was seeing in the news, just so reflected in what I was seeing on stage.
And that's what I fell in love with when I was writing it too. I was like, oh, we've been fighting about the same things forever. It's no accident that we're still fighting about how much is the government involved in our lives, which is what Jefferson and Hamilton rap battle about in my show. It's no accident we still fight about how involved do we get in the other countries' affairs, which is, in our rap battle, it's the French Revolution,
in the French Revolution,
but is still just applicable to any foreign venture the United States has, and it's also no accident that. Everyone who dies in our play dies as a result of gun violence. That's the other thing that is in the founding of our Constitution that we can't seem to get right. But is, plagues even our show, much less our country.
Yeah, and also who's an American, who gets to live here, who's a true American, what does that mean?
Absolutely.
All of that stuff, I was like, wow, this has everything.
Jefferson was using immigrant as a way of denigrating Hamilton way before Trump ever entered the scene.
Came anywhere near any of this stuff. It's so great. It's difficult for me, obviously, not to look at it through the lens of HeForShe and the work that I'm doing, and Angelica and Eliza and the sisters are clearly amazing for that. I'm trying to find. So she says. Angelica raps, you want a revolution, I want a revelation. So listen to my declaration. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. And when I meet Thomas Jefferson, I compel him to include women in the sequel.
Work.
It's so good. I love it so much.
I just pictured a million teenagers making gifs of that moment.
Me rapping?
Yes.
Oh, God.
It's the best.
I am so not a rapper, but it makes me want to learn to do it because she's so badass and it's such an amazing way to express ideas.
Yeah, and I think one of the sort of the things that Ron writes about in his book that I sort of expand in the show is this notion that if Angelica Schuyler lived in a different time, she'd be one of our founders.
Totally.
And she meets everyone who met Hamilton and Angelica together thought, well, they're the married couple, right? Because they were so
soulmates.
They were intellectual soulmates. And the letters they write back and forth. I mean, she's desperate for news. She's in London, and she married a rich British banker, moved to London, and her letters she actually also corresponded with Jefferson.
Really?
Yeah, and it's actually pretty amazing because Jefferson's trying to flirt with her, and she's not having it. He's like, he's in Paris while she's in London, and he's writing her this letter to the effect of, I'm paraphrasing, he's like, yeah, we should go to America together. We could take the boat over together. And Angelica goes, oh yeah, that sounds really nice, except there's my loyalties lie elsewhere, basically. She's like, hashtag Team Hamilton.
Hashtag I'm on somebody else's team.
So she did meet Jefferson.
That's so funny. Oh, she's so cool. So I'm interested though, because you've included these really political things in your play, and I'm interested, do you think that storytellers have a responsibility to drive us forward as a society, to encourage us to perceive things in new ways? And if you do, does this ever weigh heavily on you? Do you ever feel like that's a responsibility?
No, I'll tell you the way I think of it. I think storytellers can't help it. Your worldview affects what you see in the work, and it affects what you make.
Right.
Anything that's political in Hamilton's story is inherent in Hamilton's story, at least the way I know how to tell it.
Yeah.
And so I think the notion of Hamilton as an immigrant story, maybe another writer would not have seized on that as the through line. That was definitely my way in.
Yeah.
Having parents who were not immigrants, they were born in Puerto Rico. They came to New York. My dad didn't speak a word of English when he came here, and he came here to get a better life. So I'm familiar with that story, that immigrant narrative of like, we're going to come here and we're going to do the jobs no one else wants to do, and we're going to work twice as hard. And I recognize that in Hamilton. So that's what comes out when I write him. Someone else may have a totally different version, but I really try not to think of writing as a burden at all. My job's to fall in love, because it's got to sustain me. This show took 6-7 years to write. It's got to sustain me for 6-7 years. And so, the politics inherent to the show are just what come out of me when I write about this thing. And it's also, but it's really about being inspired and being in love. Like, there are a million biopic, biomusical worthy subjects, but if I don't know the way to tell it, I can't tell it. So if it starts to feel like a responsibility and it feels like homework, I mean, I know you love homework.
I love homework.
I don't love homework. I need it to feel like a love affair. It can't feel like homework to me.
No.
But that's sort of how I approach it.
So kind of what you're saying is that art is just incredibly personal. It's just like everyone will read the same thing a different way, will experience it differently.
And I think the ultimate way in which art can be political is that I think it engenders empathy, which is the thing that politicians can't seem to do.
They can't do.
It's if you feel like you know someone because you've spent 2 hours chronicling their life in a story, or you've seen some movie that gets you under their skin and in their heart, like, you can't dismiss them as other anymore.
No,
do you know what I mean?
It's so true. I talked about this yesterday when I was talking to Forrest Whitaker, just saying that, like, once you've seen a movie that has just opened you up to somebody else or in a different perspective, you can't unsee it.
That's right.
That's it. You're done. You're changed forever. You can't go back. You're changed. And that's what's so amazing about art and movies and plays and things.